So if you jump over to the FMBase website, there will be something there to satisfy any FMer's appetite. There are forums where you can discuss matters of the game from people from across the globe. There's one of the most rigid tactic testers there that will show you the best tactics available on the game. There's also an articles section that covers a range of things such as former Wonderkids, tips and tricks on how to play the game, databases available. There's also top 5 Wonderkid articles for players from a number of different nations. We can take a look at one of them. But where shall we start? Siamai! Croeso I FMBase. Josh ydw I, a roi ti'n hoffi football manager. That's all I've got. So if you didn't guess from that, we're going to be looking at the top 5 Welsh Wonderkids in this year's FM. And we're going to be putting them all into a team together, which I am then going to manage for the next 5 seasons, so we can make sure they're playing consistently and having some individual training to try and maximise their ability to help them reach their peak potential ability. And at the end of that 5 seasons, we're then going to be letting loose of the reins, simulating another 5 seasons and seeing just how good these players are going to get and where do they end up and if they are worthwhile purchasing in your save. So I thought it was only fitting to put all the top 5 Welsh Wonderkids into a Welsh squad, so to avoid any bias claims, I just looked at who was placed highest in the league at the time, which just happened to be Swansea. So this is the Swansea squad we've got at the moment, but the eagle-eyed among you, or the Swansea fans, will notice that there are some alien names here. So let's take a look at the 5 players that we've dropped in. So we're going to start off by looking at Chris Popov, which is a name that wasn't familiar to me until I read this article, but he is the Welsh Wonderkid with the highest star rating. He has a 5-star potential ability. He's actually a wild card and not in the original article on FMBase. But I found him and I thought he was worth a shout. He was previously at Manchester United, but he was actually playing at Leicester City, and at the start of the game he's available for less than £10 million, sort of in the region of 4 to 7 million. As you'll notice from his attributes, he is very raw at the start of the game. His mentals are not fantastic, his physicals are not brilliant, but again he is only 16, so those will develop. But on his technicals, his crossing is 12, dribbling 11, first touch 13. So there's not a lot going on here. But again, he's a 5-star potential player, so who knows? So the next name is one that may be a little bit more familiar to you, as he is one of the 7,552 players currently on loan from Chelsea.
I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
But that is Ethan Ampadu. He is on loan at the start of the game to another team, but he is available then in the next season, but you'll be looking at something in the region of £15 million. So he is slightly more expensive, but he does have 5-star potential, and he actually starts the game off as quite a solid defender, as you'll see here. A lot of the standard and core attributes that you need for a defender he already has in pretty good numbers. In his tackling, marking, his heading's a little bit weak, but his bravery is fantastic. At 6 foot, his height's a little bit on the low side and his jumping reach is only 13, so with his heading is 11, that is something you're going to need to work on, but everything else he is quite solid. So the next name is another one that should be familiar to you. It is Nico Williams from Liverpool. At the start of the game he is on loan at Fulham, and then to be honest with you, he is a little bit pricey to try and pry away from Liverpool. You're looking at least sort of 20 million. But he's a 4.5-star potential player, but you take a look at his attributes. For 20 years old, he is pretty solid. There's a lot of good numbers across the board as a wing back, and again with that 4.5-star potential he could get much better. So the 4th player we're looking at is a name that wasn't familiar to me. He actually plays for Manchester United, but he is at loan at Dundee United at the start of the game. It is Dylan Levitt, 20 years old, plays in the central of midfield. He also, just like Nico Williams, has a 4.5-star potential, and some of his numbers are pretty solid. His passing in particular and his technique at 16 and 15 respectively is quite strong, and his first touch, teamwork and vision are all at 14, so those are all quite good, and his natural fitness is at 15. Fairly ambitious personality, so I imagine he'll be looking to make a move to at least a fairly decent squad. So whilst it is a little bit difficult to work out how much he would be available for at the start of the game, you're probably looking again in the region of around about 7.5 to 10 million, but only in the second season, because as I said, he's on loan at Dundee United. The next name is Brennan Johnson, who starts the game on loan at Lincoln City but is a Nottingham Forest player. He's a player with 4.5 star potential ability, but starting the game again like Nico Williams at 3.5 stars. He's a right winger, but he can play in the central attacking midfield position, and some fairly decent attributes. His acceleration and pace at 16 and 15 is pretty good, and everything else is just pretty solid. But as we've said, he's 20 years old and 4.5 star potential. He could potentially get much better. So the last player on the list technically isn't Welsh, I believe he's Congolese, however he does qualify to play for Wales, so we're going to class him. And his name, I believe if I'm pronouncing it correct, is Rabbi Matondo. Again, he has 4.5 star potential ability at the start of the game with a 3 star current ability. At the start of the game he's on loan at Club Bruges, but his parent club is Schalke, so although his transfer value is probably around the £10 million mark, is Schalke. You could probably get him for less. So as a right winger who can also play on the left, he does have some fairly good attributes at the start of the game, mainly in his physicals with an 18 acceleration, 16 agility and 17 pace. Very good attributes for a winger. However, his balance of 10 and strength of 7 is a little bit disappointing, but again, he's only 20, so they will get better. Hopefully, likewise, his mental and technical attributes will also improve because they're not the strongest at the start of the game. But again, he's 20. So in order to fit these players into the squad, as ever, I have gone to the FMBase website to pick a 4-2-3-1 which would best suit the players that we have available. So we have fitted in Nico Williams at the complete wing back position. On the right, Ethan Ampadu as our centre back, Matondo out on the right wing, Chris Popov out on the left, Brennan Johnson in the middle and Dylan Levitt in the central midfield position. I'm also potentially going to take a look at this formation, again from the FMBase website. The main difference are the roles, so they have inverted winger out on the left for Chris Popov, which suits him a little bit better, and a wing back for Nico Williams and a ball playing defender for Ethan Ampadu, which might suit him a little bit better. So the challenge here is twofold. Not only do we want to keep these young players in the match day squad so they're playing week in, week out to try and maximise their development, but we'd also like to try and get Swansea promoted up to the Premier League and keep them there for as long as possible. It's a tricky situation. Let's start the simulation. So we're back and we've simulated 10 years into the future. The year is now 2031. Inflation has continued to rise, so a Milky Way now actually costs £2.35 and a Snickers is £4.50. Bayern Munich has now won their 20th league title in a row. PSG likewise, and somehow Piers Morgan has ended up as Prime Minister. Don't ask. But before we take a look at Swansea in 2031, let's just jump back 5 seasons, which is the last season where I was managing the team and where I was able to keep our 6 top Welsh players that we're looking at today in the squad. Let's find out how everyone has done. So if we take a look at the first season where Swansea were in the Championship, you can see here that they've actually finished in 6th position, so we had to go into the playoffs, but fortunately we managed to get through to the final where we then beat Sheffield United 3-0. Following season we managed a respectable 13th position. The year after, not so good, we dropped down to 15th. It was a little bit of a struggle and we actually flirted with relegation that year. But then in the 2024-25 season, our 4th in charge, somehow we finished in 3rd position and qualified for the Champions League. Then in the last season where I was in charge of the squad, we actually finished in 6th position, so we got into the Europa League, but hey, it's still a European competition. But enough of that nonsense, let's go take a look at the top 5 Welsh Wonderkids. So if we start off by taking a look at Chris Popov, who started off at 1.5 star, he's now currently only 2 star ability, but his potential has dropped by half a star. However, he is now playing in the Premier League with a higher quality of player, so that's probably more reflecting that than his actual drop off in ability. But if we take a quick look at the attributes, there's been some real improvement in his physicals. If we take a look at his mentals, again there's been some improvements in his mentals. In his technical attributes there haven't been as many improvements there. However, his first touch has gone from a 13 to a 15, his crossing and his dribbling are both now on a 13, and his technique has gone from a 10 to a 13. So there is some progress that he is making, and hopefully at just 21 he'll continue to develop and hopefully reach that at the very least 4.5 star potential. But if we look at Ethan Ampadu, his current ability is still 3.5 stars. However, his potential has come down from 5 to 4. However, similarly to Popov, that could just be because he is now playing with a higher standard of player in a higher quality league. Next up is Brennan Johnson, starting off at a 3.5 star current ability, then with the potential ability of 4.5. Both of those star ratings have dropped by half a star. Again, I'm going to repeat myself, this could just be to do with the fact that he is now in a better league, better quality of players around him. And unfortunately, similarly to Ethan Ampadu, there hasn't been a huge amount of drastic improvements anywhere on his attributes. So if we take a look at Dylan Livitt, previously 3-star current ability at a 4.5 star potential ability, unfortunately, like the other guys as well, he's actually dropped down a whole star in his potential rating from 4.5 down to 3.5, but he remains at a 3-star current ability. Moving over to Nico Williams, at the start of the game we were looking at a 3-star current ability and then 4.5 star potential. It has now changed to a 3.5 star potential, but his current ability is also 3.5 stars. So at 25 years old, it looks like, according to the star ratings, that he has probably reached his peak now. There hasn't been, again, story of the save so far, there hasn't been a lot of changes. There's been a few movements. Most things, if not everything, has gone up by 1. And although it looks like he might not become the 4.5 star player that we were hoping for, he is a very solid fullback. And moving to Ravi Matondo, unfortunately, his potential of 4.5 stars has now dropped down to 3. And his current ability is also at 3, so it looks like this might be the very best that we get out of him at 25 years old. So we've looked at the players after the first 5 years of this 10-season save, and although we may not have seen the development that we were hoping for, we still have 4 out of the 6 players that we've looked at with star potential still to go into. What's going to happen? Are they going to develop and reach their potential? Are they going to get any better now that they're out of the safe hands and the loving, warm embrace of Josh from FMFO? And what is going to happen to Swansea? Only one way to find out. Let's go.
Where? Back to the future.
So now we're back here. The first thing you'll notice about Swansea City is that they are no longer in the Premier League. They finished second, however, in the Championship. So the first season after he left, Swansea finished in 5th position in the Europa League. The next season they dropped down to 12th again. And unfortunately in the 29-30 season they did get relegated on 38 points, just 1 point away from safety. And then as you can see here, as we said at the start, Swansea then finished in 2nd position, bouncing straight back up on the first time of asking into the Premier League. So did that poor season in 29-30 coincide with transfers of our top potential Welsh Wonderkids out of the club? Only one way to find out. Let's take a look. So if we start off looking at Chris Popov, he is now at Watford. He was actually sold to Watford 2 seasons after he left, having only made 6 performances in the 2 seasons, and was sold then for 9.75 million to Watford, who were in the Championship at the time, and he has gone on to make a lot of appearances for them. But if we check out his attributes, really nothing has happened. He does look like he has found his level, to be perfectly honest with you. I would say, looking at these attributes, his physicals may be pretty good, but his mentals leave a little bit to be desired. Well, I would say this certainly doesn't look like, to me, a 4.5 star potential player. So if we take a look at Ethan Ampadu, he is now plying his trade at Everton, having been sold for 16.25 million the season that Swansea did get relegated. So he didn't drop down a division. He's continued though to make a number of appearances for Swansea and this season for Everton, and has had a pretty solid average rating throughout. But if we take a look at his attributes, unsurprisingly now at 30 years old, nothing really has developed. However, he hasn't really diminished anywhere that I can see, and considering his average rating, as you'll see on the screen here, is still at 7.10, he's played consistently well, so he would certainly be quite a shrewd move for you to purchase in your game. So looking at Brennan Johnson, he's actually had a few moves now. He's gone from Swansea to Aston Villa for 10.75 million, then to Southampton down in the Championship for 8 million, where he played actually very well in the Championship, over 7.1 rating for all the seasons he was there, until this season he was sold to Al Sadd in Qatar for 7.75 million. Taking a look at his attributes, not too much has changed. He has got fractionally better, but he is beginning to slow down now if we take a look at his acceleration. However, that's to be expected at 30 years old. He looks, again, quite a solid player, but to be perfectly honest with you, I would probably say lower leagues, Championship, this man would tear it up in League One. Championship, you perform well, and perhaps if you're a newly promoted squad in the Premier League, he could be a good buy for you. Moving on to Dylan Levitt, he is still at Swansea. What a faithful guy, and his attributes still look quite solid for 30 years of age. But if we take a look at his career stats, he's performed quite consistently. Only one season has he had less than a 7 rating since he's moved to Swansea. That's a lie, there's 2. But he scored, had assists and won Man of the Match awards in every single season. As we said, his attributes haven't really diminished a lot. His physicals are okay, his mentals are pretty good, and his technicals are quite solid. I would say he would not be a bad signing at all. Seems to play consistently quite well throughout the game. If we take a look at Nico Williams, he was picked up for £26.5 million by Newcastle, where he played for 2 seasons, 7.25 rating each season, and then he secured another move then on to Freiburg in Germany for £23.5 million. And again, if you look at his average ratings, he's played pretty solidly every single season. So he's now 30 years old. His attributes are starting to drop off a little bit, but he still looks a very solid fullback. He's played consistently well throughout the save, and as you can see in these season stats down here, he's continued to play well in the Bundesliga. And again, I sound like a broken record, he is a very solid player. And lastly, we're moving on to Vabi Matondo, who, like Brennan Johnson, has had quite a few moves in his time now. He went to Sporting Gijon in Spain for 7.25 million, back to England for Fulham in the Championship for 5.25 million, and then after 3 seasons at Fulham, he went to Southampton for 7 million back down in the Championship. His performances, if we look over here, have been solid if not spectacular. But let's take a look at his attributes. But unfortunately, it looks like these have begun to fall off a cliff a little bit. Most of his attributes have actually diminished here. His speed has dropped, his agility has gone up, but his pace has dropped. His corners are not as good, his crossing's not as good. So his technical, mental and physical attributes, all of them seem to be diminishing now at 30 years old. So he's probably lessening quicker than the rest of the team that we've looked at. And unfortunately, I think we can say with some confidence, this guy has not reached his potential. So there we have it, the top 5 Welsh Wonderkids as found on the FMBase site. Bless one. And I would say, unfortunately, the future doesn't look that bright for Welsh football on the FM22, as none of these players really reach their potential. However, I would say between Ethan Ampadu, Dylan Levitt and Nico Williams, you have some good quality players, certainly middle upper Premier League table, and players that you can buy for a relatively good price at the start of the game that you can certainly sell on for a profit as the game develops. But I hope you've enjoyed today's video. How would you do things differently, and what did you make of today's Wonderkids? And is the future of Welsh football as bad as Football Manager makes out? Drop all of your comments in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond to each and every single one of you. And if you have enjoyed today's video, please drop us a like and subscribe to the channel. It would certainly help us out, and we'd appreciate you being part of the family here at FMBase. And for me, you can find me at FMFO Official on Twitter or on Twitch. But remember, this is the place, it's FMBase. I'll see you next time.